The first thing I did was prime the miniature with AK's Silver Spray Primer. This primer gives an excellent result since it is not too shiny. I didn't glue the miniature to the base, so I could make this more comfortably. With white glue, I am going to place some pieces of bark that I acquired in Temu. We apply the white glue with an old brush and place the pieces of bark in the position that we like best. I personally like that it sticks out a little from the base since it gives it more dynamism. We are placing as many pieces as we want. If you see that there is a gap between the base and the feet, that is a good position to fill it with bark. Once we have placed the elements, we cover the entire base with terrain paste. I apply it with an old brush and dilute it a little with water so I can apply it a little more fluidly. We are placing it by tapping with the brush. And once we have all the terrain paste in place, we can soften the edges by passing a brush moistened with water. And once we have the base ready, we begin to apply the base layers of the different colors of the miniature. I use this red to paint the reddish parts. Notice how I load the brush quite a bit and then unload it on my hand with a rotating movement to sharpen the tip. That is the key to being able to apply broad brush strokes but with a fairly sharp tip. We cover the entire surface evenly. When the brush begins to discharge, we repeat the operation to have a good charge at all times. If we don't do this, the paint will dry very quickly on the brush and there will be lumps. Also mention that for the base coat, we can put a little water in the paint. The idea is that it is a little more fluid so that it is smoother but does not lose coverage. That's the exact point of the base layer. And we will need a second pass so that the layer is completely homogeneous. It is important to apply this second pass when the other one has completely dried. We use this light blue to do the same, but on the shoulder pad. I have taken a lighter color than what it will end up being, because since we are going to apply some washes on top, this color is the one that will be my highlight, and we apply it in the same dilution and in the same way that we apply the red parts. We have to try to make the layer completely homogeneous, and if necessary, we would apply a second pass. For this type of step, I recommend that you choose colors that cover well. For the leather, we are going to use this light brown in a base layer dilution, and with a well-loaded brush, we are going to cover all the leather parts. In the base coat steps, it is very important that we cover the entire surface well. It must be covered until it touches the element that is next to it. Of course, we can't cover part of the other element. How well this step turns out will largely determine the final result of the miniature. And we use this cream color to paint the parts that are going to be a lighter color, like the clothes and purity seals, and the process is exactly the same. We have to cover evenly in base coat dilution. I repeat again, the importance of the brush being well loaded if you want your brush stroke to be broad and without lumps. And if the paint is very thick, you can add a little water to make it more fluid. We do the same with the white on the shoulder pad, but using a slightly turquoise whitish tone. This will differentiate it from the other light parts, which have a more yellowish tone. In this simple way, we are going to differentiate the materials by color. These very light colors usually require applying 2 passes so that they are completely homogeneous. We now have all the base layers ready for our miniature, and it is perfect for the next step. We are going to give definition to our miniature by applying an oil wash. We use a brown oil and a dark desaturated blue oil diluted with white spirit. It is tremendously important in this step that the mixture is perfectly diluted. If there are lumps of oil left, it will take a long time to dry and will make the process much slower. If you dilute it well, it will dry faster. With an old and large brush, we are going to apply a wash with the brush quite loaded. We have to start the brush stroke in the area that is going to be brightest and drag towards the shadow areas so that it is that area where the most pigment is deposited, and therefore it is the area that is darkest. Every 2 or 3 strokes, you will have to reload the brush to continue applying this wash. If you do not apply it with a well-loaded brush, it will leave grooves, and the final result will not be as polished. Another point to take into account: do not insist on the areas where you have already applied, especially if they are drying, since if you do, it will not self-level as it should, and the final result will look much dirtier. And once we have finished applying it, we wait a few minutes for it to start drying. And now, with a sponge moistened with white spirit or some similar tool, we are going to remove the excess, giving light touches to the areas that stand out the most. With this, we are going to ensure that the areas that stand out the most and that are more facing the light look cleaner and brighter than the shadow areas. In this step, the direction of the brushstroke is also very important. We have to try to start in the brightest and cleanest area and drag towards the shadow area. This way, we will ensure that the small deposit left when we lift the sponge remains in the darkest area, and thus our light will continue to be clean. And this is how it looks once we have finished this first part of the process. And for a lot of you, it would be more than enough to make the base and be able to play. But if you want to see how I continue to improve it, I recommend that you continue with the video. We add approximately 30% of sunny skin tone to the red of the base layer to create a lighter tone and edge highlight all the red parts. Just like in the oil wash step, what we were looking for was to bring out the definition in shadow. That is, to make the gaps between the different parts look darker, and that gives it definition. Now we are going to do the same, but in reverse. We are going to look for the edge of each element, and we are going to highlight them with a lighter color. This will make all the elements quite different from each other, and with a simple glance, we can distinguish the different parts, making our miniature look much cleaner and more defined. If you have problems with this type of brush technique, I remind you that this week on my Patreon channel, I am going to upload a video in which I explain all the brush techniques, how to execute them, and when to apply them. A video for all levels that I think will help you a lot to improve your technique. And remind you that the videos on my Patreon channel are both with English voice and Spanish voice. We apply a wash of this red ink mixed with 50% of the deep shade thinner. We are going to apply them with brush very loaded, just like we did the oil wash, but the function of this wash is different. What we are looking for is that the color of the shadow is unified with the color of the light. That is, for everything seem to be within the same set. Furthermore, with a simple step, we will make the shadows in the red area more reddish than the rest of the shadows on the miniature, making the final result much more interesting than if all the shadows were the same shade. And again, we use exactly the same color with which we had edge highlighted previously, but this time we are going to highlight only the most important edges, that is, those that are most oriented towards the light. When applying the red wash, we had lost a little contrast in the light, but we will recover it in this simple way. In addition, now we are going to have lights with a darker tone in the mid-tones and lighter lights in the light area. In a super quick and super simple way, we have made red look much more interesting. We are going to do exactly the same technique, but on the shoulder pad. We are going to start the brush stroke in the brightest area of the shoulder pad, and we are going to drag towards the bottom part, which is the part we want to be in shadow. Once this layer has dried, we are going to apply a second one to make the shoulder pad slightly darker, but that point is up to personal taste. You can make as many passes as dark as you want the shoulder pad to be. And once this ink wash has dried, we take the same light blue with which we painted the base layer, and we are going to highlight the edges of the shoulder pad, and we are also going to make lines and dots in the flat areas to generate noise and texture that will make that area look more elaborate without too much effort. It is important that you highlight the edges well. Remember that the objective of this step is the definition. Therefore, the edges have to be completely highlighted so that the entire contour of the shoulder pad can be seen perfectly. It is very important that you apply this step without applying too much pressure with the brush on the miniature. If you press too hard, the line will come out thicker than what you are looking for, and the edge highlight will look like a stain. And we add this white turquoise to the color of the previous step to create a light blue tone, but even lighter, which we are going to use to make the maximum highlights of the edge. We are only going to do this in the area of the edge that we want to be the brightest. Usually, it will be the one that is most oriented towards the light, or that area that is the most visible in the main view. And we use that same white turquoise to paint the edge highlights of the white part of the shoulder pad. The process is what we have been doing before, base coat dilution, and we are going to highlight the edges so that that area can be seen well defined. We insist more on the part that is oriented towards the light, and in the areas that are more hidden, we leave the colors from the previous step so that it looks darker. And we add approximately 30% of sunny skin tone to the base brown of the leathers. To do the same, the difference is that on the leather, we are going to work with very short brush strokes to generate a lot of texture and make the leather look worn. By making a lot of lines between the edge highlights, we are going to achieve that effect. The trick is to make the lines closer together in the most visible parts that are more oriented towards the light, and in the areas that are more shadowy, such as those on the sides, make fewer lines so that they look darker. And the same for the edge, we paint the brightest area evenly, and as we get closer to the light area, we begin to do it by stippling. With this, we achieve two things: that the areas that are stippled look darker than those that are painted homogeneously, and we also simulate that the leather is worn, leaving the sensation that the edge is irregular, as if the leather were cracked. You have to try to ensure that the lines are not completely symmetrical and parallel. Try to change the direction of the brushstroke, since that will give it much more naturalness and will make the final result much more believable. With very little effort, the leather looks great and would be more than enough for a miniature of these characteristics. Keep in mind that this miniature is for playing. You could work a lot more and obtain more professional results, but we are applying just what is necessary so that the miniature looks great without complicating things too much and without applying techniques that are too difficult. With the parchment, we do the same as we have done with all the other elements. We take the same color that we had used in the base layer and highlight the edges. If we have areas that look very flat and wide, we take the opportunity to make dots and lines to add texture and make that area look more elaborate. That trick can be applied on practically all elements and works quite well on miniatures of this scale. I highly recommend that you practice it, since it is a quick and easy way to make the areas look worked on without the need for much effort. Now, all the elements look much more interesting. Before painting the gold, we are going to paint in metallic those areas that we have stained on the armor when we have painted the other elements. We are going to give light touches with the metallic until the surface is homogeneous. And once we have the arrangements made, we move on to painting the gold. We make a mixture with yellow ink and brown ink diluted with the deep shade thinner. I have added brown to the yellow since gold is not completely yellow, it's slightly more desaturated. That is why it is important that when you are representing golden elements, do not use fully saturated yellows. Always try to tone them down with some other color. It has approximately 50% thinner, and we are going to apply it as we have done previously. The brush very loaded, and we start the brush stroke in the areas that we want to be lighter and drag towards the shadow areas. You will notice that since this color is translucent, it will respect part of that shadow outline that the oil washes gave us, giving a quite beautiful finish. It is also important that you be patient and wait for it to dry to see the final result, since when we are applying it, it looks much worse than when it dries. If when it has dried, you see that it needs a second coat, apply it. But I recommend that you wait for it to dry completely before making that decision. At this point, we would also have the miniature finished for those who don't want to invest more time. We would only have to make the base and the miniature would look great, but I am going to continue trying to improve it. To do this, I make a mix with metal medium, plus sunny skin tone and a little yellow ink to give it that golden tone. To darken it a little more, I added brown ink. The mixture has sunny skin tone. That's going to serve us as a bit of a dollar. This will ensure that when we place our lights, they will not be exaggeratedly bright. And when we rotate the miniature, they continue to be seen even if they are not reflecting the light. And the work is the same as what we did with the rest of the elements. We are going to look for the edges, we are going to highlight them, and in between the edges, if we have areas that are very wide and flat, we are going to place dots and lines that will help us generate textures, noises, wear, etc. Definitive to make flat areas look more worked and interesting. If we did this step only with a light metallic color, it would have the big problem that when we rotated the miniature and this color did not receive light, it would look dark and those areas would not appear to be edge highlighted. To solve this, we add that little bit of matte color. In this case, it is the sunny skin tone, which will fix our lights, making them look painted, even if it is not receiving light directly. With this trick, we will make our true metals look quite good, regardless of the position of the miniature, with respect to the light source. And look how the gold looks quite beautiful, and it really didn't cost us too much since we didn't have to make lights and shadows in the traditional way. To improve the armor, we are going to create a turquoise blue with blue ink and green ink. We are also going to dilute it with approximately 60% or 70% of the deep shade thinner, since this time we want it to be even more translucent. The objective of this step is to give a different tone to the silver part of the armor, and this tone is always interesting to be seen in the shadow area and midtones, since we always want the light to be lighter and cleaner than the rest of the parts. We apply it as always. We start the brush stroke in the area that we want to be lighter and drag towards the shadow area. We can use our fingers to clean the light areas. This is very practical, simple, and quick to do, and I really do it throughout the process. We put the layer, drag towards the shadow, and clean the light area with a touch with our finger. We don't put too much pressure, we're practically grazing it. And now, with this brown ink diluted with approximately 70% of the deep shade thinner, we are going to continue enhancing the shades of the shadow. But this time, we are going to paint those shadow areas that are the deepest. That is, those that are on the sides of the miniature, or those parts that are oriented towards the ground. Remember that we can always help ourselves with our finger if we stain the light area. Just by rubbing a little, we will clean that area. Notice how the silver armor has gained a lot of chromatic richness. To continue giving definition to the silver parts, we mix these two colors to obtain a light grayish tone, but somewhat matte. Remember that by making these pigments a little matte, we will make them look good even when we rotate the miniature. We are going to look for those edges that are more oriented towards the light, and we are going to edge highlight them. We are also going to generate a lot of noises and textures within the shadow area and within the mid-tone area to ensure that these areas do not look flat. Metallic pigment usually dries quite quickly. Since we have the brush very well loaded, it will be enough to make a rotating movement with the tip of the brush on our hand to rehydrate the tip. I do this all the time to make my brush strokes longer, and if I see that even by rehydrating the tip, I am not able to do a few consecutive highlights, I reload the brush well so I can be edge highlighting for longer. You can also put a little retardant on the paint. This will make edge highlighting easier, but be careful that if you put too much, you will lose coverage and the edge highlights will not show as much as they should. The texture work is what makes the flatter parts look worked. If you don't do it regularly, I recommend that you implement this little by little until you master it. You will see how with very little effort, you will be able to make parts that are flat look quite attractive with very little effort. We add to the previous mixture to make the color even lighter, and we are going to look for those points within the edges that we have already painted that are more facing the light. Those are going to be our main highlights. There we are going to make some light touches to make the armor sparkles. Pay attention to how I'm working the brush stroke. If you notice, I make a slightly homogeneous area and then finish with a couple of dots to serve as a gradient. And the line does not cut abruptly. These types of details will make your miniature look much better. We already have the miniature ready in the absence of the base. For this one, we are going to do it with oil washes since we are trying to invest as little time as possible, but with a fairly good result. We are going to make 3 mixtures, one orange-brown, another dark brown, and finally another blue mix. The 3 quite diluted since what we are going to do is watered down. The diluent we have used is matte. When this dries, it makes the colors look much whiter, that is lighter, and they give a great earthy look to finish the bases. With the brush well loaded, we are going to cover the entire surface of the base with the first orange tone. We are also going to cover part of the feet so that the dust effect integrates the miniature with the base, making it look much more believable. After a few strokes, I load the brush again so that each brush stroke I apply has enough charge. Once I have covered everything with the orange tone, I apply a few touches with the dark brown tone and also with the blue tone. I do it a little randomly on the side and back of the miniature. This way, the front part will be the lightest. This is how it looks once it has dried, and as you can see, the result is quite credible. We decorate our base with some tufts. I chose these from IKEA, but you can really use the ones you like. With some tweezers and super glue, I place a couple of them in the areas of the base that I see as dull. And now I'm going to put some leaves that I acquired in Temu. For this, I put white glue and put the leaf on top. A trick is to do it with 2 brushes, one with which we apply the glue and another moistened one to pick up the leaf and deposit it in its position. And finally, we painted the edge of the base in black to make everything on top stand out more. This is how the base would look. And this is the final result of the miniature. I hope you liked the process. And having said all this, I'll stop rambling now, and until next time.